part 2 of Ohiyesa, and I'm just listen to what I just made, and it sounded like my voice got softer and softer. So I will try to keep up the volume, and hopefully this video will go faster. Last one's about 40 minutes. I'm hoping these will be about half an hour long, because it's a lot to watch. Okay, so we're going to go back to our main screen, and we have here a picture of a copy of the book Soul of an Indian. It's published in 1911, and we're really just going to look at the first 2 pages of a reading in detail. The rest of the reading sort of gives you an idea of what it's like to live in a culture that's based around virtue ethics, and actually some of that is good, but some of it also, when we look back at it, we might critique. So first, though, I want to just go through like the first 4 paragraphs, because we get some really interesting commentary and from Ohiyesa. So, all right, let's start off with this short paragraph. He writes, "Long before I ever heard of Christ or saw a white man, I had learned from an untutored woman the essence of morality." So that untutored woman, who is she? The untutored woman. Well, that has to be his grandmother, right? Who raises him, and she never went to college. She has no diploma. She's untutored, and yet she is able to teach him, he says, the essence of morality, the core of what it means to be good. And he says, I learned this before I had heard of Christ, right? Before he is introduced to Christianity, before he meets the white man, the new Americans. So that this is something that might seem strange, because the missionaries, right, that come over are here to save the Native Americans, to teach them what it means to be good. And he's saying we already knew, and I learned it from someone who couldn't read this book. So, all right, let's see where he goes from here. So he writes, "With the help of dear nature herself, she taught me things simple but of mighty import." Right? Nature is important. And this is sort of a naturalistic ethics. And we could see that also in Aristotle, right? Aristotle also gives us a naturalistic ethics. And why might we say that? Well, we know that he studies things like trees in order to develop his principle of moderation, right? Too much water is just as bad as too little water. There's some middle point where the right amount of water is given to the tree, and it most flourishes. So here is Ohiyesa also saying that from nature he learns what it means, what goodness is, moral goodness. All right, let's continue. So he says, "I knew God. I perceived what goodness is. I saw and loved what is really beautiful. Civilization has not taught me anything better." So yes, the new Americans did bring civilization, but he says it wasn't anything better than what I had already learned from my Native American teachings, my heritage, my culture. And it's important that he says he knew God, right? That he wasn't godless. was often a way of attacking the Native Americans. Okay, let's go on to the next paragraph. So we're just going to read these, and this is actually great practice in just how to read philosophy as we go sentence by sentence and try to unpack what's there. And there's much more there than what I'm saying. I'm just scratching the surface, but it gives you an idea of sort of the process. Okay, so then he writes, as a child, I understood how to give. So as a child, this is when he's within the Native American world. And he's gonna set up sort of the Native American world versus the New American world. He's gonna distinguish, make some contrasts between these two worlds. So in the Native American world, it's culture of giving. And that is true. In fact, what kind of person you were was realized by how much you could give away. And the more you could give away, the greater you were as a person. So great people gave everything away. And it was a general practice that if you had food, you always shared it. And whenever there was something special, you would give the greatest gift that you could to the one who would receive gifts in whatever, a wedding or whatever it happened to be, in which you would give gifts. The New American world. He says, since I've joined the New American world, he truly believes that he is a New American also. Right? He's forgotten that grace since I became civilized. Why? Because there's not a culture of giving in this new world, in this new America. Right? There's a culture of attaining wealth and possessions. Right? Who is honored? Those who become wealthy and rich, and they become respected in this new American world. So we have a very interesting contrast here between these two, and that who's given respect. Okay. Now let's continue on. He says, I lived the natural life, whereas I now live the artificial. And so he lived in nature, and he grew up. It was this natural life. And now he says he lives this artificial life, and we have to put that word artificial into context. It doesn't mean that it was a fake life. The original meaning of artificial comes from this word artifice, and it meant that which was made by hand. So it's a world that's been constructed by humans, and we can see how that's the case. He now lives in a house that was built. He doesn't live on a dirt floor, in a teepee made out of animal skin. Very different worlds between living in nature and living in a city. So he sort of develops that a little bit more. He says, any pretty pebble was valuable to me then. Every growing tree an object of reverence. And now I worship with the white man before a painted landscape whose value is estimated in dollars. Thus the Indian is reconstructed as natural rocks are ground to powder and made into artificial blocks, which may be built into the walls of modern society. And what are we doing right now? We're building skyscrapers, right? Incredible, but different worlds. So, okay, let's unpack this a little bit. Here in the Native American world, Right? We're able to see value in a pebble. Now this is going to seem strange to the New American because pebbles are everywhere and there's not much you can do with a little pebble. Right? So if you can't do much with it, and it's in abundance, so it's not anything that is rare, it seems to be worthless, right? If someone went outside and grabbed a pebble and says, "Oh, I'm rich," you'd laugh at them. Say, "I could get 10 pebbles in 2 seconds." So where's the value there? What kind of value is this? Well, let's go and see what the value is in the New American world. In the New American world, what's valued is dollars, right? Everything is estimated in dollars. Well, what does that mean? Well, a dollar is not. We don't value dollars because they're beautiful pieces of art. The reason why we value money is because it can buy things for us. It's useful. It gets us things we need. So we call this sometimes instrumental value. Instrumental value, also use value. Right? If something's useful, it has value to us. If it can't be used for anything, it can't get us anything, then it has no value. So rocks that can be ground into powder and turned into bricks, artificial blocks, that can be then used to make these huge buildings, that has value. But a single pebble, not much you can do with that. No value. So what do we call that value that the Native American sees in the pebble? Well, there's something special about what that pebble is in itself. Or that tree. He says a growing tree. Something he reveres. Right? A single tree is pretty worthless to the New American. A forest that you could chop down and get lumber and build things, that would have value. So what is this other value? We could call it categorical value or formal value, and these are words we use in philosophy to say that the value comes from what it is in itself. Categorical means just the categories of something is the essence of what it is, that which makes it what it is. Or the form of it is what you need to understand its value. And that in just knowing what it is, that's enough for it to become valuable. Well, what is a pebble or a tree? Well, it's a part of nature. It's created by nature and part of nature. And nature is something larger than a single person, something greater than us. It connects us to something beyond us, and that may have value as not a pebble that you can use, but as a pebble, as a piece of nature, or as a tree, a living, growing being. Okay, so that kind of value isn't really recognized in this New American world. We have here a criticism in some ways maybe of the New American world, that it's blind to these other types of value, so that it doesn't think twice about chopping down an entire forest or blowing up half a mountain to make powder to build bricks, because it doesn't see that other value. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so I'll give you a little musical interlude. Alright. Continuing on. The first American mingled with his pride a singular humanity. The first American, right? So this is the Native American. So he's still giving us this distinction. Let's go back up here, make some more room. So mixes pride with humility. Right? Spiritual arrogance was foreign to his nature and teaching. Okay, so spiritual arrogance, we're talking about religion here. And that there's this arrogance, he says, that is something that's just not what he's used to when it's a part of religion. And, some of that arrogance might come off when you have missionaries coming and saying you to be saved, you need to believe in our religion. That our religion is the right one. And that if you don't become a part of this one and believe in this one, you'll be lost. So that's something strange to him. And let's see where he goes with this. So he says he never claimed that the power of articulate speech was proof of superiority over dumb creation. On the other hand, it is to him a perilous gift. Okay, so what is he saying here? In the new American world, the reason why humans are superior is because they have the power of language, and this makes us a higher animal. So the power of language makes us a higher being than other animals, right? And so we have the Bible, which is it's a book of words, right? And what happens in this new the Christian religion that the new Americans bring over is that they give sermons, right? Religion is spread through sermons. And the preachers are very gifted in speech, right? The power of articulate speech. So this is seen as a benefit, the ability to be able to speak, use words, read, and to be able to speak about one's religion and articulate it. On the other hand, Native American, he says that language is, what's the word he used? Does he say double-edged? Perilous gift. Right? Language is a perilous gift. What does that mean? It is a double-edged sword. So just as much as it can make distinctions, right, articulate, he says it could also, at the other end, a sword that has two edges could cut in front of you, but it could also cut you back. And that's why it's perilous. Why is it perilous? Well, what's wrong with language? That it might also do harm. Well, this is where we get to a very important concept for Ohiyesa, and that's silence. Right? The value of silence. Versus the value of articulate speech. Okay, so what does he say about silence? Silence is the absolute poise or balance of body, mind, and spirit. So to be silent right? You need to be balanced. If you're off balance, you start talking, your mind wanders, right? But when everything's in balance, that's when you're able to quiet yourself. So silence is this sort of poise. The man who preserves his selfhood, or we could say the human who preserves their selfhood, ever calm and unshaken by the storms of existence, not a leaf, as it were, astir on the tree, not a ripple upon the surface of shining pool. His, in the mind of the unlettered sage, is the ideal attitude and conduct of life. So, to be silent against the storm of life, right? And life is turbulent, there's stuff going on, change. To be able to be silent in the face of it, it's not just about being balanced, it's about strength, incredible strength, to be able to just face whatever you're facing and not try to turn it into something else or talk your way out of it or talk it into something else, but to face it silently does require strength and courage. So silence becomes something quite powerful. Let's go back up here to dumb creation. Dumb here is not being stupid, it's not being able to speak. Lacking words, lacking the ability to speak was what the word dumb originally means. And now we use it as a word for unintelligent or stupid. It's an insult to somebody to call them dumb. Well, why is that? If it really just means not able to speak, well, it was just assumed if you couldn't speak about something, then you were ignorant of it. And when the new Americans came over and asked questions to the Native Americans, do you know who God is? Do you know what God is? Tell me about your spiritual practices. The answer from the Native American was silence. And it was assumed that this meant they had no religion, they were ignorant, they were primitive, and they needed saving. And here Ohiyesa is telling us that no, this silence was not a sign of arrogance. The silence itself was an answer, but it was misinterpreted. And if we think about it, what then might the Native American mean when the answer to who is God is silence? Well, the Native American says, articulate speech is what they encountered, right? The New American talked a lot about who God is and what God wants and God's plans and God's rules. And the Native American answer of silence was, I will not speak for God, right? Pride, but humility. God is beyond me. And the word for God in Native American culture was the great mystery. The great mystery is not something that I can define and tell you what it is. It's beyond me. I'm just this finite, small human, right? So to speak, to try to define God, was to do an injustice for the Native American. The best thing you could do was to let God speak for God's self. And that meant to truly hear something, to truly hear the communication, the speaking, the expression of the great mystery required one to fully silence themselves. Because if you're talking, you're not listening, right? You're missing things. But if you become truly silent and attentive to the world, the Native American thought that that's when you can hear God. So if you want to know about who God is or what God is, the Native Americans' answer was silence. You must be completely silent, and then you will know God, because you will hear God. So it was actually a very powerful answer. And it was missed, right? It was interpreted as ignorance. And this can happen in classroom, right? A teacher can ask a question, no student answers it, and this teacher could assume, oh, everybody didn't do the reading, they don't know the answer. And that might not be true. They might just be thinking. So we often misinterpret silence as ignorance, and that's how we get the word dumb, where not being able to speak becomes just being unintelligent. And it's often to misread things or to look over something that actually is much deeper. Okay, let's do one more paragraph. So Ohiyesa continues and says, if you ask him what is silence, he will answer, it is the great mystery. The holy silence is his voice. If you ask what are the fruits of silence, he will say, they are self-control, true courage, or endurance, patience, dignity, and reverence. Silence is the cornerstone of character. Guard your tongue in youth, said the old chief, Wabasha, and in age you may mature a thought that will be of service to your people. So this is a different virtue ethics than Aristotle. Aristotle gives us 12 virtues. He says, try to be all these things, develop all these virtues, and you'll be a good person. In the Native American virtue ethics, it's more organic. And you start with just one virtue. And from that virtue, other virtues develop. So, the root virtue is silence. And from that virtue, we get all these other virtues like self-control, courage, endurance, patience, dignity, reverence, right? We could add others too, right? Something like compassion. You don't really have compassion for anybody until you actually listen to them and hear them and connect to them. And that requires you to sort of be silent to hear them, silent enough to hear them and witness them. So there's many more. In fact, a whole tree of virtues will grow from this single seed of silence. And we could understand how important silence was in Native American culture. And they're living out in the wild at night. If you're too loud, you might bring predators or signal where you are to your enemies. Right? So at a very early age, you have to learn how to be silent. When you're hunting, if you're not silent, your prey will always escape you because they'll hear you coming. So life itself, it becomes vital that you learn how to be silent. And perhaps that's something we've lost, in our modern times, how important silence is. I'll talk about this right at the end. But here's just a few things that have come up that we need to remember. This idea of categorical or formal value, right? That it's the intrinsic qualities of something that make it valuable, what it is. And we compare that to instrumental value. Okay. This goes into more of what we've just been all talking about. Let's skip that. Important part of virtue ethics that it's situational, right? You don't get rules of what you can and can't do. You become a good person, and then in whatever context, whatever situation you find yourself in, if you act out of your virtues, you'll do the right thing. Let's see. So the core virtue is silence, and that leads to all these other virtues. There's a cool meme or whatever you want to call it that silent has the same letters as listen. They just shuffle them around. There's this close connection to silent and listen. Coincidence? Probably, but pretty cool coincidence. So there's this critique of the New American culture that the New American culture only sees instrumental value, becomes blind to the categorical value, intrinsic value, formal value. And this is a critique that Ohiyesa is making of himself too. That he realizes he's forgotten in some ways as an adult. He's trying to recover it, and he thinks that maybe it might be helpful to us to see more than just one kind of value. Okay. We talked about misreading silence as stupidity. And finally, actually two more things. Perhaps Ohiyesa has a lot to say to us and when he talks about silence, because we're a culture where we're always talking. We're always connected. We're never disconnected. And in class, I see students going to their phones all the time, talking all the time. And if we don't make an attempt to really practice the skill of silence, we lose it. It becomes impossible for us to be silent. We're always chattering. So perhaps you should try in your own life to think about the importance of silence and how to practice it. Okay. The last thing I want to say is in the rest of the chapter that we read, where you sort of learn, part of the life of the Native American and how virtue is very important. And that's really what it's about, is that virtue is important to the Native American. We see that some of what that is might make us uncomfortable. So if character matters, then what that culture decides is the proper character of a person sometimes can not be what that person wants. So there's, in the chapter, parts where they talk about different rituals where women have to be pure, and that's part of character, is this purity, and that if you're impure, you could be kicked out of your tribe, and that seems harsh, and it also seems to be imposing certain character values on other people, and that might be a dark side to virtue ethics. That and we talked about this with Aristotle, that virtue itself is just comes from the word for manliness. And is someone not a man if they're not this huge muscle-bound, loud, beer-guzzling person? We can question virtue ethics and the models that get set up for what it means to be virtuous. We can challenge those. We could either, from within virtue ethics, say, I want to try to reform what it means to be virtuous, to flourish, what that looks like, or we might be a little bit wary of the whole ethical theory itself. We're going to now move on to another ethical theory next week. and we'll see where that takes us. Okay, hopefully you are enjoying this, and I will be posting more videos.